Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining today's conversation. I think we are good to get started because we have uh, lots to talk about today. So, thank you for joining today's conversation on building smarter, more connected transit systems. I'm Kelly. I'm on the customer success team at Spare, and we're really thrilled to have you here with us for this important discussion. At Spare, we understand that today's transit agencies are juggling more than ever, multiple service types, evolving rider expectations, and the constant pressure to do more with limited resources. And when each mode operates in a silo, it becomes harder to deliver efficient, reliable, and equitable service. When you add in resource limitations, multiple service models, and tight reporting expectations, things can get complicated fast. But what if every mode and every team could work together as one? So today we'll explore how agencies can break down barriers between their systems, teams, and services to empower a more seamless rider experience and a more efficient operation. You'll see how centralizing multimodal workflows from reservations and dispatch to planning and support can unlock new levels of visibility and coordination. And most importantly, we'll look at what happens when your riders can plan, book, and pay for trips across microtransit, paratransit, and fixed route in one unified system. Spoiler alert, it leads to higher satisfaction, better data, and services that are easier to manage and scale. Cool. So before we jump in, a few housekeeping notes for how you can best engage in today's discussion. So the chat is open. Feel free to say hello, let us know where you're joining from, or drop in comments as we go. We have a Q&A as well. So if you have a question for one of our panelists, use the Q&A function. It's a button at the bottom of the screen, and we have time saved at the end for audience questions. So we would love to hear from you. We'll also be launching some polls during today's sessions to hear your perspective. So keep an eye out for those pop-ups and take a second to respond. We also have Metro Micro's customer story linked in the resources tab below, so feel free to check that out to get a deeper look as we move through today's session. So we want this to be engaging and interactive, so don't be shy. Your questions and feedback help make these conversations richer. So with that, I think we're good to get started and introduce the panelists that are joining me today. Cool. So joining us today, we have Christina Pfluger, who is the project administrator for Metropolitan Council of the Twin Cities. We also have Ben Pacone, who is a transit planner for Metro Transit. And we have Joy Gunderson, who is a programs manager at Schmidt & Sons, and Spares product manager, Nick Millam. Cool. So I will kick us off. So with all of these unique roles and expertise, I'm sure our audience would love to better understand how you all work together to deliver these services. So Christina, would you like to give us a quick overview for how you all collaborate?
You bet. Thanks, Kelly. So as Kelly mentioned, I'm Christina Pfluger. I'm the project administrator here at the Metropolitan Council. And so the three of us, Ben, Joy, and myself, we work together very well. The Metropolitan Council is the governing body of the 7 counties in the Twin Cities metropolitan area. And it consists of 4 divisions. And those divisions are Metro Transit, where Ben works through and under, and the Metropolitan Transportation Services, MTS, and that's where I am part of, as well as Environmental Services and Community Development. So that's the 4 divisions that the Metropolitan Council has. Ben is the planner for Metro Transit, and I am the project administrator here, and we both work and serve Metro Micro, which is exciting. And then Joy operates as the program manager for Schmidt & Sons, and Schmidt & Sons is our boots on the ground, our operator that has our contract for our vehicles. So the 3 of us work really well together, and we're excited to share more.
Amazing. Thanks, Christina. We are excited to have you all join us. Okay, so let's begin the discussion by looking at what's happening in transit across the industry. So, according to APTA, 66% of transit users regularly rely on multiple modes in a single trip, but most agencies struggle to offer an experience that's actually designed for that kind of multimodal journey. Without real-time coordination between services, even the best intentioned programs can fall a little short. Riders end up facing delays, confusion, or mismatched trip segments, and that makes it harder to rely on transit. And while the 2024 National Transit Database shows that microtransit is growing fast, it's still often poorly integrated into broader networks, meaning its full potential isn't being realized. When systems are disconnected, we see the consequences. There's lower adoption, lower satisfaction, and planning tools that don't reflect how people actually move through the system. So that's the real challenge because if you can't see the full journey, it's incredibly difficult to plan smarter, more responsive service. So today we're excited to talk about how Metro Transit is changing that story. First, we would love to hear from you in our audience. So we have our first audience poll. When it comes to planning or operating your microtransit services, which of these areas do you most want to improve? So this is multiple choice, and we have defining the right zones and service boundaries, scheduling drivers and managing daily operations, understanding how riders are actually using the service, coordinating with fixed route and other modes. And then the last option is I don't currently run a microtransit service, and that's fine. If you don't yet and you're curious, we're always happy to talk to people about that as well. Oh, so we'll give everyone a few more seconds to get their answers in, and then we will take a look at these results. Okay, so more than half of people are interested in understanding how riders are actually using the service, which I think is great. We need that data to be able to plan. But we had folks answering all of the options. So yeah, I think that is a great segue into the discussion today. So we will be hearing from our panelists for how they improved accessibility, trip planning, and operations through a connected system. So let's start with understanding the operational foundation of this setup. So, Joy, can you share how the system helps you stay on top of things during the day? What tools make the biggest difference for you operationally?
So I'm Joy Gunderson from Schmidt and Sons. When we first had started out, a lot of things had to be done manually, and we had to do a lot of juggling to figure out with scheduling and to try and look. And now we're able to do a lot more stuff in real time and keep trips reliable. We make sure that the customers understand what's going on. And we're able to, if we need to, like make quick changes in the software that we're now using. And then it reduces the burden both on the driver and also with dispatch because they're able to communicate faster to each other. So it's helping to bridge that gap that wasn't there before.
Yeah, and we're always happy to hear when communication is a big improvement. So, what does that look like in practice?
So we currently, within Spare, they have a tool in it where we can message the driver and the driver can message us back instead of having to stop on the side of the road to use their cell phone and get out of the seat. This allows if we see them behind or we see something that maybe just doesn't look like, we can reach out to the driver and say, hey, is something wrong? Do you need our help? And vice versa. They can get right to us. And it makes the driver feel supported by having this and it acts in a way that they know they're supported and dispatch understands what's going on as well.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I think we'll pass it over to Christina. What stands out to you about how the platform enables visibility, especially around contract performance or operational metrics?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. So I specifically spend a lot of my time every day. Spare is open, the platform is open, but I spend a lot of my time in the service analytics page, specifically looking at those ridership KPIs, being able to see our completed boardings each day, like in real time, but also going back and just tracking those trends, completed boardings, no shows, cancellations, wait times. Having all of that available has been very helpful. Like just you can see it at a glance, like Joy said, in real time. That way, if something is happening, her and I can message back and forth. Like we need to make a change, but definitely that service analytics tab has been very helpful in our day to day as we're growing.
Cool. Yeah, and I know another big thing that we worked on recently is just being able to spot things like no shows as well. I think that's been a topic we're talking about daily to make sure that we're following the policies and riders are also very aware of what the policy is and kind of where they're sitting.
Yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Thank you, Christina. So next question is for Ben. Based on the new level of visibility that Joy and Christina both highlighted, how does it help close the feedback loop across teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the visibility and the ability to adjust the zones in real time is helpful working in as a team for kind of two main reasons. First, it allows us in the planning stages when we're putting out the boundaries, we certainly do our best to kind of get ahead of any concerns that there may be from operators, from passengers, but uh, having that real time ability to adjust the zones lets us test and refine the boundaries and kind of react to driver and dispatch concerns that we hear. So, if we put down a zone somewhere in a specific location, like a park or a school, where there's maybe multiple places we could be picking up a rider and there's a little bit of confusion, we can react to those, that feedback that we get pretty quickly and then make those adjustments in real time rather than going through kind of a longer process and, you know, as we previously would have to do to try to kind of make those changes. The other thing that it helps us with is it helps us correct mistakes and other oversights that we made when setting up the zone initially. So an early example of this was we set up our zone in the North Minneapolis area with the intention to include a specific apartment building at one of the edges of the zone. Instead of including that entire building, we accidentally cut through part of the building. So there were a majority of units that were included, but some people's homes weren't included in the zone as we intended. With that real-time adjustments that we could make, we were able to kind of adjust that zone and fix that problem without going through those extra steps that we would normally have to. So.
Yeah, I remember we had a few riders who got creative with the pin for pickups to
Mhm.
make that work. But yeah, it's always just better when we can make it seamless for the riders and drivers. Okay. Next question is for Nick. So can you speak to how riders are accessing this service using self-serve tools? So is there anything unique to the Metro Micro setup?
Yeah, of course. Happy to. As Kelly mentioned off the top, I'm Nick Milam. I work as a product manager at Spare, and in particular, focus heavily on the rider experience. So how riders are accessing services, learning about services that agencies are providing, and going to one single place, hopefully, to be able to book and manage those trips. And so, yeah, that's what's relatively unique about Metro Micro's setup, and something that we were excited to launch with them when we first did, I guess, late last year. When Metro Micro launched with Spare, they also got access to Spare One, which is our rider-facing application that helps riders book and manage trips. It's fully white labeled, of course, for the Metro Micro brand, so riders can continue to look for a brand that they trust and that they know, and both when it's downloaded and when they're looking for it in the App Store. And in that app, riders are, they're booking trips within the microtransit zone that Ben just touched on. And in that example, which I think is a great one of, Ben finding out this piece of feedback and going in and adjusting the zone. As soon as that zone was adjusted within the Spare operations platform, riders would see that reflected directly within the rider facing application. So riders are able to book those trips directly within those zones, but we're also seeing a lot of riders, book using more services around the city. So I think that's what we're excited about, and I think what we're talking about a lot here today, is the ability for riders to plan end-to-end journeys that include more than one service. So that might, of course, take them outside of the zone or have them start and end entirely outside of the zone, and they're just looking for the schedule of the fixed route bus or train that happens to be traveling nearby them. So we've seen some great stories of riders getting around the city. One in particular that I can remember of a rider taking 4 trips throughout the city, of ones that connected on demand and microtransit services, ones that were just a fixed route train to get from St. Paul to Minneapolis, and then heading back home with that same fixed route to on demand connection. So planning their entire day all in one application is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Okay, so it sounds like this new setup is designed to give you more answers and visibility into the areas that matter the most. So let's talk about what that impact is like for the riders. So Christina, with 89% of trips now booked through the Rider app, what does that tell you about how riders are adapting to the system?
Yeah, for sure. So 89%, it's huge for us. And it definitely tells us that the app is user friendly. The riders want the control and they get that. They can see the vehicles when they make their request, they can see what kind of time frame they're looking at, as well as the vehicle approaching, which is super helpful. It also allows us to send out like in-app announcements. And so, I mean, we're in Minnesota, so we had some weather this winter and we were able to send out a quick announcement for that. Like Kelly mentioned, we've been really focusing on our no-show policy, our code of conduct, and we've been able to send out a quick reminder of that. So that's really helpful. But overall, I really think it's just allowing those riders to have their control and that transparency of their trip. Also, their ability to cancel if another alternative comes up or their schedule changes. So having that 89% is great. It also takes some pressure off of dispatch. So yeah, we hope to see that number continue to grow, but we're very pleased with that number.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Christina. And there still are other booking options that are available outside of the app as well. So, Joy, I'm curious how you ensure riders using different booking methods still get a smooth, consistent experience.
Yeah, one of the things, we do have a lot of, I don't want elderly population who are not as tech savvy and don't have the app. And the one thing that we make sure with our dispatch is that they're giving them the same customer service level that anybody else would get. And we make sure that we book their homes, we document where they go on a lot of times so that when they do call, we have it ready, we can go get them booked. We make sure, we let them know the time frame when the bus is going to pick them up, and we just make sure that they get the same kind of feeling that a rider who uses the app. And we make sure that they're happy. And if they give us feedback, we try to fix things. Going back to when they were talking about that apartment building, that's one of the feedbacks we get with some riders. So, and that's how we were able to get those things fixed. And from taking calls on the phone, it does help to bridge that gap between people who don't have that app and the people who want the service.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that there's the amazing call-in customer
Yep.
service experience.
Yep.
The app is accessible, so for people who have different technology needs or requirements when accessing the app, they can use it. And there's a web app version as well. So for those riders who maybe aren't as comfortable using a mobile device, they can book rides from their at-home computers as well. So there's a lot of different options that are available for everyone, whatever their comfort level and preferences as well. Thanks, Joy. So Nick, from a technology perspective, can you elaborate on how Spare One unifies the rider experiences across booking channels? So what makes it work for both app first and phone-based users?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and Joy touches on that exactly there. That we're trying to provide the same level of service regardless of how a rider is booking that service and finding out about that service. in some way, we're trying to make the app reach the level of quality that Schmidt and Sons is providing as well, because I know that's high. But from a technology perspective, all of the information is stored in the same place. So regardless of if a rider is booking from the rider-facing mobile application, the web application that you mentioned, Kelly, which I know a small percentage of users use in Minneapolis, or if that 5 to 8% who are calling in, and they're just booking over the phone with a booking agent who then plugs the booking into a desktop app. All of those are stored in the same database, and we can all update them all at once. So even if a rider called in and they booked a trip that way, but they happen to have the app for some reason, they can even still track it over there. They all communicate with one another, and they're all working together in that way. We even have other forms of ways for riders to book that we're rolling out this year, utilizing the latest in AI technology so that riders can communicate in natural language, both over the phone and via texting, to be able to book trips and track their trips even that way as well. And that's updated using the same information. So there's many ways for a rider to access your service. Our philosophy is that we want to meet the rider where they are. Of course, we want to provide a great mobile experience and push that for as many users as possible to cut down on the number of calls that Joy's team has to handle throughout the day so they can focus on delivering an excellent service. But we recognize that there will always be a percentage of riders who don't have access to technology or for whatever reason choose not to use it, and they should still be able to book the same trips and have access to the same information.
That's great. Thanks, Nick. Ben, we've heard, and I got to experience firsthand that there was real excitement around the Gold Line launch. So, can you speak more to what this service is, the rider's response, and how this addition fits into the broader goal of making travel more connected for your riders?
Definitely. Yeah. So the Gold Line is a brand new 10-mile fixed guideway BRT line that just opened this last March. And so it connects downtown St. Paul to and extends out to the east along I-94. So begins and ends in downtown St. Paul and then extends east along Interstate 94. And it serves a lot of high need populations along the way and then kind of ends in a community at the eastern edge of the Twin Cities, where we certainly have seen a lot of high population growth in the past years, a lot of jobs, especially with kind of those non-traditional hours and shifts, but with a built environment that has made it kind of difficult to serve with fixed route traditionally. It's a little lighter on density and maybe not as much of a clean grid as we're used to in Minneapolis and St. Paul. So knowing that the Gold Line was launching in March, we launched the Metro Micro Zone in the Woodbury area in January of this year, ahead of that launch to kind of to be ready for that launch and to serve as kind of a first last mile solution for local trips within that service area. So we were very intentional about that being one of our first expansion zones to launch because of this large transitway investment that we were putting in the region. So helped us leverage that large investment and emphasize with riders that, microtransit is a way to get around within the zone, but it's also a way for you to connect in and out of the fixed route system. So, with the opportunity, with the events of the Gold Line, we were able to also promote Metro Micro as kind of a new service and a new way to get around when you arrived in the area, or if you're from the area trying to get into the system.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Thanks, Ben. And we do have some pictures from the Gold Line launch, and then we also have a quote from a Metro rider, and it just says, "I don't need to ask for help. Every time I want to go somewhere, I just book and go," which I think is what we're always hoping to hear from riders, that we can make the experience as seamless and easy for them as possible. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that both the operational team and riders are experiencing immediate benefits and improvements from this new setup. So Nick, what type of data can Spare provide agencies to help them turn insight into impact?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the things that I see the most excitement about when we work with Met Council and other agencies that are utilizing this feature, if we call it that, or this product. The I saw in the poll from earlier in this webinar that a vast majority are looking for more information on how riders are actually using your service. And I think that's what's really exciting about bringing all service types into one application, regardless of if it's an on-demand service or a fixed route service, a bus or a train or BRT. That data is now truly available for those end-to-end journeys. So I can use an example actually from just yesterday. I'm here in Los Angeles at the moment and was heading into the office yesterday and booked a trip from where I'm staying into downtown. And the most convenient way for me to get there was to take an on-demand vehicle here in LA to a major train line and connect to the A line into downtown. So of course that's what I did. I waited for my on-demand vehicle to pick me up, and I was pooled along the way with a rider who had a much shorter trip in the middle. They were picked up and dropped off, and then I was eventually dropped off at the A line station. I waited about 3 to 4 minutes and got on that A line. And while I was a rider who was sitting in this on-demand vehicle, hoping that I make this connection that this software has told me that I should make. I can see physically the fixed route vehicle, the train. I can see the location of it moving closer and closer to me as I, in my on-demand vehicle, move closer and closer to the station. So I have confidence. I can see the real-time data updating. I know that I'm very likely to make this connection. Of course, I did and was a couple minutes early and able to grab a coffee before heading into the office in LA. And so now agencies that are utilizing this multimodal trip planning, they can see that. They can see that Nick looked for a trip from A to B, and the option that was suggested and the one that he booked involved an on-demand leg and it involved a fixed route leg. And you can dive into the details of what was that fixed route leg, what service was it on, what route was it on, was it late even at the time, did they make their connection? And so you can really, you can really understand how riders are utilizing the full family of services that you offer, not just guessing maybe they connected to a fixed route line because maybe they booked their on-demand leg to a train station and I think they connected to the A line, but there's other trains that go through there. Which route were they actually connecting to? Where were they trying to going? What are the hot spots of pickups and drop-offs? Those are all now available for agencies that are utilizing our multimodal trip planning functionality. So that's quite exciting for us to be able to provide. And I know that Ben and the team who are looking at that data are quite excited to see it. The other piece that's kind of a byproduct of that is, of course, in order to power this end-to-end journey planning, we need to support the latest in GTFS schedule data and GTFS real-time data, so we can provide that experience to the rider that I just mentioned, that I was able to track the train coming towards me. And we need to provide the latest automatically in GTFS Flex data, which is how our trip planning engine is able to know that there is an on-demand service available to connect to those fixed route services. And so we automatically export GTFS Flex for services that are planned using the Spare technology. And that means that GTFS Flex is available to the agency as well to spread out to other ride planning apps that riders might be using. So this just helps tick a box for agencies to be able to share that information more widely, get that information into other trip planning apps. Because as I said, our philosophy is we want to meet the rider where they are. Of course, we want to offer one single place for them to come, but we recognize that there will be users of other trip planning applications, and they should also have access and be able to know that your on-demand services are available there. So you can think of other services like the Transit app, and hopefully soon one day Google Maps and Apple Maps being able to support these on-demand services. And all of that is automatic with Spare. You're able to get access to that GTFS Flex data. Self-serve, there's a button within the platform to export whenever you want, but it is also automatically exported on a daily basis. So yeah, I hope that helps answer your question, Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just saying that we have a question in the chat that is pretty relevant to kind of what we've been talking about. So I think someone asked, is the first and last mile capped at a certain distance? So how different is it to previous fixed route in the area? So I think that's probably a good question for Ben. Maybe just talking about what services those riders even had available before microtransit launched.
Yeah, a lot of our BRT that we're building in Minneapolis is based on previously high ridership local routes, but the Gold Line was unique in that it kind of was, it's a brand new route that was, nothing before. So it's, in this case specifically, it's more new access that these riders are now having to an area where previously they maybe only had a local bus, but it was, not a comparable service. So in this specific area, it's more new riders that are now both have a Metro Microzone and the Gold Line to get to and from St. Paul or anywhere in between. For the zones in general, we don't have kind of hard and fast rules about how Metro Micro can be used when it's connected to fixed route right now. It's anywhere within the zone we allow riders to travel. We are pretty intentional about keeping the zone compact and smaller because we know that kind of those shorter first last mile trips that are about on average a mile or two max creates a lot more of an efficient trip rather than kind of longer distance trips where it's harder to pool riders together and they're traveling a lot longer on those buses. So definitely trying to keep those zones compact and keep the wait times down to encourage people to use fixed route when that's possible.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. So if we're thinking about the future of Metro Transit, how is your team utilizing Spare and using the visibility to influence the way you think about new zones or services?
Yeah, it's a lot of what Nick just talked about in terms of access to data that previously we didn't have, or um, we have a lot of access in the platform to self-service ourselves to these origin destination data. So we can plan strategically and not so much kind of make assumptions based on data that we had previously. In fixed route, we certainly have a lot of information about how many people are riding a certain route and even where they are getting on and off buses. But this is a lot more localized to these specific areas, which is really helpful and kind of opens the door um, to a more strategic way to planning. So, even in our previous microtransit zone, we would know where people would board and alight, but we didn't know necessarily if they were getting off a microtransit vehicle to get onto a BRT station, to get to a BRT station, or if they were using that microtransit trip to get to a destination that's next to that BRT station. So with multimodal, it's just kind of one more data point that kind of gives us that fuller picture about where a rider is trying to connect to and from kind of in their whole journeys, their whole journey.
Yeah, and I think it's great. Like, obviously, you hear from riders and drivers all the time, and then being able to validate the assumptions and also confirm the patterns and have that be data driven is always helpful. Sticking with Ben for one more question. So we understand that you're planning to launch 6 new zones over the next 3 years. So what makes those areas high priority, and how does the data support those decisions and how you made those considerations?
Right. So at Metro Transit, we started with our pilot zone in the North Minneapolis area. So that was a 2-year pilot from 2022 to 2024. And so, the service was very popular. It was, successful by all metrics that we could think of. But we, after that pilot ended, we took an opportunity to step back and kind of reflect on how we could or should use microtransit effectively and sustainably throughout our entire region. Metro Transit and the Met Council, we provide transit for the 7-county region, and there's very different types of land use and very different types of built environments throughout the entire Twin Cities. So we knew that microtransit was a flexible service that could kind of fit almost like a Swiss Army knife that can fit any kind of problem that you have and be solved with. So we decided that we wanted to position these microtransit zones in areas where we know that there's a high transit need, and we know that there's populations that are trying to either access these areas or live in these areas and access the fixed route network, but where the land use or the built environment was difficult to navigate or efficiently serve with a fixed route bus. So after the North Minneapolis pilot, we decided that the next zones in our region would kind of be sprinkled around our region, but connecting always to either kind of these high frequency fixed transit ways, like the Gold Line, our own version of the A line, things like that, or to a transit center where there's lots of local connections to get in and around the network. So
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Um, And after that first zone, we launched two more zones. So, Christina, we saw a big ridership milestone in February. So, we had over 10,000 boardings that month. What were your thoughts on hitting this number? And do metrics like this help you make the case for service expansion or continued investment?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, hitting that over 10,000 completed boardings was very exciting, and we've continued to see that increase. In May, we had 14,000, so it's very exciting. It really, in the month of February was our first full month having 3 zones in operation, so 15 buses out at our peak time of day. So it really just shows that getting the word out, having additional buses out, having the app that's very user friendly, really shows the need for the service, as well as, again, having those KPIs to justify and see the growth has been really exciting. And yeah, we're excited to see it continue to grow. We're expanding into 2 more zones now at the end of the summer. And yeah, it's exciting to see that number continue to grow.
Yeah, I think there's certain days we were all sitting there refreshing the page to see if we were gonna hit the certain number before the end of the day. So yeah, always excited about that. I also wanted to look ahead a little bit for Spare One. So Nick, are there any new features or functionality that you are excited about that will support agencies like Metro Transit even further?
Yeah, of course. We're always trying to innovate at Spare and bring tools that we think will benefit agencies like Met Council and others. And on the Spare One front, so again, for clarification, Spare One is our rider-facing application where we can bring all types of trips and services into one place for riders to be able to book and manage those throughout the region. It's of course white labeled to the agency that we launch with. So for Met Council, that's the Metro Micro brand. Yeah, some things that we're excited to be working on and rolling out over the coming months. One of those is an ability for friends and family members or caretakers maybe to be able to book on behalf of riders. This is something that we have in beta right now, and we're adding more features to as we go. And it touches on what we talked about at the beginning with Joy as well about providing many avenues for riders to be able to book and manage their trips self-serve. And of course, we recognize there's a community of folks who, might rely on a friend or family member or a caretaker to be able to book for them. And so we want to provide that functionality for riders to be able to book on behalf. And then another thing that we're working on is bringing even more fixed route schedule information to the fingertips of riders, just straight from the home screen, being able to identify what the rider's location is, their closest stops and routes, and then showing them the scheduled pickup time for those particular routes at those particular stops. And so, for habitual riders who are regularly riding the Gold Line in Minneapolis and then planning to connect to on demand at the end, they can just very quickly open the Spare One application and just see, oh, well, the Gold Line's going to be passing me in 5 minutes. That's a little bit too soon to be able to get to, but the next one's coming in 15 minutes, and I'll aim for that one. So just providing that information at the fingertips of riders directly from the home screen. And then we're also constantly working on tooling for agencies to be able to, fine tune the trip options that are presented to riders. So Ben touched on previously, of course, the rules today within the Minneapolis region are that riders can book on-demand trips within the zones that are available to them. So within North Minneapolis, you can book an on-demand trip from anywhere to anywhere. You're of course, if there's a convenient stop for you to be picked up at, you are located to that stop. But perhaps there might be a bus or a rapid train that would be more convenient for the rider to take. It would maybe be a lower wait time than what's available on demand right now. It's maybe a very similar walking distance, a very similar number of transfers. And so, nudging riders towards those lower cost options would help to be able to keep the on-demand service for riders that are asking for trips that are truly first mile, last mile, or they're in areas that are not serviced by fixed route. And so we're adding configuration for agencies to be able to, input and fine tune those details of when fixed route options are presented to riders first or only, and when on-demand services are presented to riders. And so that's something that we're excited to be rolling out over the coming weeks. We're putting this under the umbrella of helping agencies being able to ensure that on-demand services are not cannibalizing their fixed route services, that they work hand in hand together.
Yeah, That's great, Nick. And I think that's something that everyone is always excited to hear more about. Great. So I think we are going to move into the kind of Q&A section. So first one, I have one for Ben. So you touched on buildings or parks that might have multiple areas that riders would like to be dropped off at. And I think there's, for myself as an occasional rider, trying to go to a local park in a new city and figuring out where to get dropped off is not always the easiest. And if you use the PIN provided by your built-in map system, that also doesn't work well because it's going to be in the middle of the park and not somewhere where the vehicle can go. So Ben, what have you found is the best way to designate where the rider would like to be dropped off? So, is that making stops for each kind of door or drop-off area for the vehicle to pull up in spare? Are you adding notes to the trip for the driver? And then, yeah, what's the best way to kind of accommodate some of those parks or larger areas of interest?
It's definitely a very case by case type situation. We have a lot of different sized parks, different sized schools, often kind of suburban strip malls and parking lots are areas where we see a lot of rider driver confusion. So admittedly, it does take a little bit of kind of manual tweaking and adjustments of staff time to go into the service and kind of set up zones within zones. But we've primarily used pins that we've placed in there to kind of direct riders, snap riders to specific stops that we've designated within those kind of zones within the zone. So um, uh, we kind of look at each area individually and say, well, within this area, where is it feasible for one of our microtransit buses to navigate to and from, and put stops strategically around those areas so that uh, a rider is never so far away from a stop that it's unreasonable to ask them to walk, but it's still kind of within the operationally feasible for a driver to get to and pick them up. So it's a lot of helping riders and drivers meet each other and be aware of where someone's waiting. Because like you said, Kelly, often if you do it within Google or somewhere else, it'll just put you in the center of a park or in the center of a school and waste a lot of time kind of trying to find that rider.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Ben. And I think that actually leads nicely into a question that came through in the chat. So I think maybe this one is for Joy, but what type of vehicles are you choosing to use for microtransit?
We have their Fords. They have 3 wheelchair hookups and 8 seats. I literally can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but they're comparable to what would be a sped bus on a school system. They're very similar. They have a wheelchair lift and a driver. But they're smaller vehicles, so they can fit in narrower, if I can say the word, roads, so they can get down, especially like in North Minneapolis, because the roads are smaller. It helps to be able to get, and then also in winter, they can get around things with plowing and things like that. So it does help to have smaller vehicles.
Yeah, and I think one thing that at the Gold Line launch is, as someone who's ridden buses, but I live in a city where we don't have as many microtransit options. I was also just surprised that the drivers had a functioning door. It wasn't like a bus where they're getting in and out the same
Yep.
as all the
Yep.
riders.
Yeah.
They have an additional option, which I think can sometimes just add some flexibility to the day depending on what's going on.
Yeah, and it's also helpful because of how they have to, when they have to go do the wheelchair, to be able to get and go around, because otherwise they have to lift up, and yeah, so it's a lot more functional for them.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Okay, so next question. Were there any, and any of you can jump in and answer these, so feel free to take turns. But are there any lessons learned on staff adoption when it comes to consolidating modes under a single system? So any kind of learning opportunities that came from launching a new software?
So I can kind of take this on our end with the drivers and the vehicles and those things. Is some of the things that we are learning and adapting to with the multimodal function is we kind of have to make sure it's on, that we're getting the people where they need to be. So one thing we're able to do is if we can see like the drive, because we have certain times of the day where it's very busy. And if we know that this person needs to get somewhere and we're not going to be able to, we can go in spare and reassign it to maybe somebody who has less people closer so that they can get to where they need to go. And we've been doing that a lot and it seems to be helping. And we've also really made the drivers aware of the multimodal function so that they're aware that that passengers are going to have these, maybe be a little bit panicked because they need to get on time, but it makes them a more aware and more helping the passenger.
Yeah, and I think that's always great when we can create an experience where you can also have saved information about
Exactly. Yeah.
drop
And I
off
was going to say
drivers.
that before on one of them, the passenger or the rider can also put, like when you were talking about where the pickups would be, is in their own notes, they can write, if they book like home, they could say pick up in alley instead of, because it will give it their address, but we would know to go to the back. So that's something that also helps.
Yeah, I think that's great. How do you ensure that the on-the-fly changes still align with broader planning and policy goals? So I know Joy and Christine are often in there looking at things going on, but how does that flexibility also help with the bigger picture?
Yeah, there's definitely kind of a temptation to, when you have access to data right away, there's a little bit of a temptation or we're all trying to solve problems here. So you kind of want to react instantly and make the change right away. And sometimes that's really helpful, like when we talked about operational concerns or kind of small tweaks to the system that, would make a big difference in terms of rider experience or drivers. But um, when we make these kind of larger planning decisions or kind of policy decisions, we definitely want to take a step back and think about it. But the fact that the data is available to us instantly and that we can filter the data in any way that we need in real time, that's helpful for speeding up that decision-making process, even if it is a little bit of a longer timeline than those kind of instant fixes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We had another question in the chat. So, is the Metro microservice available to everybody, or is it limited to certain individuals? So, are people pre-approved and pre-registered? Um,
It is available to everyone. They set up their own accounts. So we don't have any limits on that. We have never, yeah, we have all walks of life. So there's no pre-approval, nothing. It's just they get the app, they sign up. As long as they have a working phone number and can verify, they can ride.
yeah, that's great to hear. And
Yeah.
we do work with some other agencies who do require those pre-approvals. So we can do that with the Spare One app, but in this case, the service is open to everyone. And then part two for that question, um, throughout the service zone areas, are we utilizing designated stop locations or can the vehicle stop anywhere in the zones?
We don't have designated stops within the zones. So anywhere within the zone that it's safe for a driver to pull over and stop, we'll allow the driver to drop off and pick up passengers.
Yeah, that's great. I think other than those few things like parks or
Right.
some of those large attraction type buildings where we might coax the riders to make sure that they have a safe drop off.
Yeah, and it's as long as where they're telling us to go is where they want to go, we pick them up and we drop them off. I mean, we don't like to, if they go, oh, I want to go here, we tend not, that's part of not what the on-demand service is. So, but we do, if they say they want to go to McDonald's, we drop them at McDonald's. So,
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Joy. Okay, I think the next question in the chat is probably a good one for Nick. So, are the number of stops, so those pickups and drop-offs, preset or known in advance, or are those service stops added dynamically?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So it really depends. The spare can be configured in the way that you'd like to run your service, but I can speak about the Met Council example for sure. So within at Council, the on-demand service is truly that. It's on demand. So you can book for up to the next 30 minutes. You can look for a ride to leave right now and get one within the next 30 minutes. And so that means that service stops can, of course, be added dynamically. So in the example that I gave where I was traveling around here, I asked for a trip from A to B and it covered almost the entire zone. I had to, my trip was at least a 20-minute direct drive time. But you can configure within Spare how much detour is allowed for your service. So if you'd like to offer, a very luxurious service to your riders where the direct travel time is exactly that and there's no detour, you can do that. And then the rider would see when they're booking, they would just see a very short range, maybe a 20 to 22-minute trip. And I would book that trip and I'd probably get taken exactly from A to B. But you can also add, detour flexibility to the service. So you can say, I'm all right with riders being detoured maybe half of their direct travel time or 2 times their direct travel time. And I can set minimums and maximums. You can even compare the detour flexibility based on what's available for a fixed route. So if I was to take a bus, how long would it take me, and then compare and then add detour based on that. So there's many ways to configure the Spare service. And in Minneapolis, there is a small amount of detour that's allowed. So riders would typically see a small range when they're looking for a trip. So if I, as a rider, look up A to B, I typically see, maybe a 10 to 20-minute trip. And I click that and I book it. And in, the best case scenario for the rider, it's just a 10-minute trip. Nobody else is booking at that time. They get brought A to B. But there's a possibility that while they're on their way, they get routed a little bit out of their way to pick someone else up, then they get dropped off, and then that person gets dropped off. All of that is communicated directly within the application so the rider can see the route that they're going to be traveling. They can see a little indicator for a stop that they might make along the way so they know why they're detouring. And they're informed when they book the trip that there is a range that the duration could be. It could be anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, for example. So yeah, I hope that helps answer your question, Niv.
Yeah, and I think having those real-time updates for both riders and drivers just helps with communication and transparency. We don't want people to be surprised or frustrated throughout the day. So, yeah, so for drivers, their pickups and drop-offs will show up on the tablet, and then they'll receive the directions that are relevant. Even if there are changes throughout the day, there are some guardrails in place to make sure it's not a wild ride for everyone, that they have some insights into what's about to happen. And then from an admin perspective, another feature that I use on a day-to-day basis, especially when we're looking at trips, is we have a feature built in called time travel where you can log into the admin platform and just sit and watch what the vehicle did all day. So you can take a look and see what happened, which trips got added in. And it's a really good way just for there to be some kind of a backup for drivers so that what they're talking about is documented, and just give you kind of those insights as to how their day went as well. Cool. Um, so I think with this type of system, there's a lot of data and insights that you're getting daily. So how do you prioritize which insights to act on first? So any advice to avoid analysis paralysis?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I'm going to go back real quick and I want to say I always consider when I'm watching the buses, they're like little life pieces. I just love watching them when they're up. So, but yes, I'll take that question. So, definitely focusing on the insights that provide or would have the biggest or potential impact. Focusing on operational performance and the rider experience. Quickly I'm trying to react to if like it's an increased wait time or missed trips, trying to act on that quicker. But like Ben said, when we're looking at the rider experience and seeing those numbers, taking and looking at those trends. So really just prioritizing that we want to make sure that that rider experience is awesome, and for taking our time to really look through the data on the trends and where people are going, to help avoid that analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Yeah, I think being able to look at that is really helpful, and also just sometimes rider and driver feedback are competing as well. So being able to take a step back and do some pattern spotting can really help with prioritization as well. Um, And then another question in the chat, is Spare's software set up to help with commingling? Short answer is yes, but Nick, is there anything additional you'd like to add?
Yeah, of course. So with the definition of commingling, being having multiple services utilizing the same fleet. So a standard definition would be you might have a service that's only available to certain individuals, like a paratransit or custom transit service, and then you might have a microtransit service that's available to the general public. And both of those can utilize the same fleet. So you can have riders who are picked up for the paratransit service and then detoured to pick up someone else who's on the microtransit service in the same area, going in the similar direction. So this can help cut down on fleet costs, of course.
Yeah, and I think in this case, the Metro Micro program is just a system for everyone. So it gives people, even if they have access to another service, it's another option that people can choose to get them where they need to go. Okay, I think we have made it through all the questions. Is what I'm seeing in our docs. So yeah, we really appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to join us. We always say thanks for sparing some time to be with us. So we really appreciate the Metro Micro team. So Joy, Ben, Christina for being here and taking the time to do this with us today. If you have any questions or want to follow up, feel free to reach out to either me or Nick. Our emails are up on the screen. We will be sending along the recording access later this week. So if you wanted to share this with anyone you work with or wanted to go through any of this again, we also have some additional resources, including a case study that we did with this team a little while ago. So yeah, anything that you're curious about in terms of multimodal or just providing exceptional multimodal services, we have a really great option with the Metro Microservice in Minneapolis. So anything we can do to help other agencies see that success, we're always happy to answer questions and help that get set up. So I think we are wrapping up just a couple minutes under time, which is rare for me. So that's great. But yeah, really great talking with everyone today. And yeah, thanks for joining us.